Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast where we figure out what we think and we examine our biases and we do some therapy and we try and just put ourselves on a better path for ourselves, for yourself. My name is Michael Forrest.
Sounds amazing. And I'm Ivanka Majic.
And this week we're going to talk about different kinds of capital. Which is because there was this interesting blog post called "Don't End the Week with Nothing," which I just clicked on thinking it was going to be about, going out for a pint on Friday night. But no, it meant don't end the week having generated no capital for yourself. If you want to sort of like go forwards. Anyway, and this is the Articulate Podcast. It's live now. What are your thoughts on capital?
Well, I think that I read the blog post. I think it's an interesting discussion point. I don't necessarily agree with the don't end the week with nothing and accumulation of capital. However, I do think that one does accumulate capital that's not just cash, and that being aware of it is useful. Yeah. I recently did a very short contract in which somebody said to me, he said, we don't buy Ivanka by the minute. we need, sort of, I think as one becomes better and learns more and knows more things, better at what you do type thing, it's not just the time you spend doing something that is the value that you bring.
Yeah.
It's all that other stuff that you know.
Yeah, and all the stuff that you generate, and there's it's
a good topic.
Capital. So capital can be spent the way different types of capital are spent and exchanged, and I don't know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's going to be the subject. I'm going to try and press the right buttons and take us into the episode. Oh, and we have to keep talking for this bit.
Do we? Oh. No. I want to talk to you.
Oh my god. How's it going, Ivanka? How's your week? Well, it's been 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yes. We had 1 week off because that was booked because it was Good Friday and we decided to have a week off. But sadly for me, the day before Good Friday, my cousin died of COVID-19 related complications. So it was actually the Wednesday night. So Good Friday, I was at his funeral.
Right.
So
where was this? Were you in? Was it?
I'm in Croatia. He's in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Right.
He's my first cousin. You know, our fathers were brothers.
Okay.
He's all of the cousins. Cousins is, if you say cousin to somebody, it can mean somebody that you occasionally see at a family wedding. In this case, this is somebody that I have spoken to 2 or 3 times a week for years.
Right.
And so he's somebody that I genuinely miss. I still am in that bit where I just can't believe it. So I've been to the funeral. I've done the sobbing. I had the hives last week. So I was having to do the antihistamine because I'm glad I took the time off because I definitely needed it. I'm glad I was able to go to the funeral even though it was terrifying because of COVID, and because of the fact that so few people I didn't know if I could go. Turns out you can go from Croatia to Bosnia and Herzegovina for up to 12 hours as long as you can prove that you've been to a funeral.
Right.
And then we had you're going to have to excuse me a minute.
Ivanka
Even
is
though it's live, I'm having an invasion.
An invasion? Who's coming in?
An invasion of the small child is deciding to invade right now. I can't talk to you now. I'm really sorry.
We are live.
We are live. And nursery's closed because there's so much virus about.
So as Ivanka does this, I'm having a decent time while Ivanka goes off and I'm having
I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to mute myself for a second.
Okay, Ivanka is muted for a moment. we what do I do? Because this is not edited anymore. So usually we would have edited this bit out of the podcast, but instead I am forced to try and be entertaining on my own. Maybe I can tell you about some stuff that is fun. This is weird because I don't know if Ivanka's still got her headphones on or what is happening. Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of coverage on this thing before we get started on it, this capital thing. Oh, Ivanka's back. This is
Hello.
This what an exciting. I'm bad at vamping. This week I've learned that I'm bad at vamping.
What does vamping mean?
Like talking to fill the time whilst just vamp for a bit.
This is the risk of the live recording, isn't it?
Yeah. Very disappointed in myself. I considered going into an advert. I was like, maybe I'll read the post.
Play some music.
I should have played a song, shouldn't I? I should have played some trumpet. Okay, sorry. Yes.
So yes. Funerals was quite scary. So you could. I was able to go. Everybody reasonably adhered. There were some rules in place, so people. I mean, these funerals in Herzegovina are quite. Normally the coffin would be in the house overnight. There'd be a proper wake. There'd be people coming all night. It'd be. It's quite a. It's a very. I think funerals. We've discussed this before. They're kind of an important ritual. But we were able to do and then all the way there it's like, do I hug his children, do I touch them, do I not touch them? I did hug them. I double masked. I then went and changed all my clothes. There's all these you're on the one hand you're devastated and you want to bring comfort, and on the other hand you're terrified, and it's a very it was an experience. I'm glad I went. We were able to do that thing that a family does where we were able to laugh about him and cry, because he's also normally the person that sorts everything out. Right. So it's like, who arranged the funeral? Because normally he's the one that sort of just does everything. So there was a bit of that. There were still some people that weren't wearing masks. Some family. What the effing priest,
right,
who presided over the ritual, was not wearing a mask, and I thought, you absolute shithead. It's like, because it's like local.
Was it a small room? Was it like?
No. It was outside at the graveyard. Okay. It was the actual, because it was Good Friday. I was spared a really long Catholic mass, because you're not allowed to have a big mass on Good Friday. Yeah. So it's a bit of a win. I didn't know that.
I feel like I should have known that.
Well, I as you know, I'm like under educated as somebody from a Catholic family, but I did manage to join in with a couple of prayers, but they were praying the rosary, so it was repeated so many times that even I got the words right after a while.
Yes, wow.
It was it was outside. It was a sunny day, windy, so I felt like the COVID thing was sort of minimized. But
did this, because the last funeral I went to was my grandmother's, I don't know if you had this feeling, but I felt like far too much time was spent on church propaganda and how brilliant God is, and not enough time on the person. It was like, no, Jesus is great. No, we're not talking about Jesus today.
It's like, well, actually, it's a good job you asked this, because it just reminded me. It was very short. So instead of the usual 2 hours, literally like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then a few minutes at the grave. So there's a chapel at the graveyard that was very open, and there was ropes around so people couldn't come and give condolences. So anyone who was attending had to keep a distance from the family. Yeah. But we ourselves were in a very well ventilated area, and then we moved to the actual grave. Yeah. But, he stood up. And he basically and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to listen to this. Come on then, convince me that this is so. And he started talking, and he basically spent, I'd say, 15. He mentioned my cousin and that he was a nice man. And the thing I remember about him is that he came to mass every Sunday. Yeah. and people who come to mass, it was basically, he didn't mention being a good person or doing good or being kind to other people. The currency for getting into heaven was how many times you attended mass.
Yeah,
and I was like,
it's all very self-serving, this stuff.
I was like, I was absolutely blown. I was listening. I was really listening. I was like, okay, it's only going to be 20 minutes. I can probably pay attention.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is, it's really rude.
Really?
But it wasn't even like the fact that he spent so little time talking about my cousin. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. There is some ritual that you've got to read and do. But then when you had an opportunity to talk about generally humans and what they need to do to get into heaven, there was nothing about being good. It was about coming to mass and giving them money, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, wow.
I'm
glad he's reinforced my post-Catholic.
Well, I think what you have to remember is it's like it's sort of marketing has become a lot more sophisticated in the last few decades, like centuries, and one of the things that those sort of old kinds of religion thrive on is just like, it's sort of like spam. It's like marketing, just like we're just going to keep repeating these messages, but now I think we're a bit more sensitized to someone trying to get something out of us. So when I hear a sermon, it just seems like this really crude marketing effort designed to make me keep coming to church and keep believing in the stuff they want me to believe in. And it's not very sophisticated by modern standards. So, and then I guess you do get the more sophisticated types of marketing on like American TV now. But like something like a traditional Catholic service, it's just going to seem, or Church of England is going to seem sort of crude.
Well, it sort of seems to be I think it emphasized, like if you listen to Thought for the Day on Radio 4 or something, and they get a variety of people, different clerics, blah blah, philosophers, whatever, there's always, generally I'd say most of that sort of Thought for the Day stuff invites one to think broadly about humanity or the state of the world or everybody else. This was so narrowly focused on attending church as the currency for a good life. And then it reinforces this whole thing my dad used to rant about, was this like, his church gives you justification for having a shit life because don't worry, suffer all this crap, come to church on a Sunday and then you'll go to heaven. And it's like, there's no, it's not giving you any tools to expand your thinking or have a better life now while you're having it.
But it's stuck in some old ideas, and it's not sophisticated in terms of, and it certainly wasn't invented when in the modern world, so it sort of doesn't know about loads of things that we now have to deal with. So the only thing to do is double down on the sort of the old dogma, or invent some new angle on it all.
Well, like COVID is a conspiracy, so when I do the last rites for somebody who has died from COVID, I won't wear a mask. Well, fuck you. Geez. I was very, sorry, Auntie Annette, for the swearing.
Just saying fuck you to a priest. It's fine.
Well, I think he's just lost every opportunity for respect, personally.
It's a shame.
He's a leader in a community that looks up to the church, because most people who were standing around that graveyard were not wearing masks. And COVID has gone haywire. We could talk about how my cousin was on the scale of people really trying to not get it. And there is another aspect of this, which is the privilege of being able to not get it. To be able to work from home, to be able to, as my daughter says, earn money out of the computer, get money out of the computer.
Get money out of the computer. It's the way forward.
But it's a privilege that he couldn't, he just couldn't afford himself ultimately. And so then for in that society, for such a powerful community leader, to not wear a mask, to not set an example, is just, for me, appalling.
I think
I think I've made my point.
Priest.
We don't like the priest. Otherwise,
so how
though.
am I anyway? I am.
How are you, Michael? How was your week?
My week. Do you know, I'm going to flip this 180 degrees directly and talk about like the ultimate way of making money out of the computer that I was witness to like a couple of weeks ago now. Basically, the new version of The Binding of Isaac, Repentance. Well, a new version of The Binding of Isaac came out, a DLC called Repentance. You know what DLC is, right? Downloadable content. Basically, after 4 years, this new version of this game's come out.
Oh, it's a game.
Yeah, it's a game. And Twitch is a place where people play games that we're
right,
on right
okay.
now.
Okay, hi,
I was witness to this guy. So there's a couple of big Isaac streamers that are now basically they're getting a payday. Because now suddenly they've got my favorite streamer is now he's streaming to 17,000 people whenever he's live, and he's just playing this game. But this other guy who's one of the top Isaac streamers, he was on there, and I just sort of watched him almost having a panic attack as every 5-10 seconds a new subscription would come in. $5, and he was he made, I think he was making 20 grand a day playing this game. But what he was doing was sort of killing himself to do it. He was streaming 12 hours, just non-stop. But yeah, just absolutely, it's whereas the other guy's just had a baby, and he's Northern Line. He's had a baby, so he's having to have work-life balance. So he's playing a lot of it, but it's 9 to 5. It's working hours. But this other guy's just staying up all night and kind of going till 10 the next morning, just to sort of really just get as much as possible out of this release.
A fascinating phenomenon,
isn't it? But yeah, yeah, they've been playing it for 9 years. This game, most days, every day, basically. There's a video.
And that's their job.
Well, basically, yeah. A streamer.
So before the new version came out, were they just playing the old game over and over?
But it's a game that's interesting because it's random. It's a game where it's randomly generated every time. So you have to have these 20-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute runs, and basically they can be very different each time. Although after a few years, they sort of it's more of a sort of stream of consciousness, listening to someone talk. It's quite relaxing. You go to sleep. So
it's not watching a game of, I don't know, Snakes and Ladders.
No, it's
it doesn't have a beginning and an end.
It's almost it's kind of, when you think there's 500 different items that you can pick up in the game that are randomly and that all have different effects. Basically, you're this baby that his mother wants to kill him, and he's running through the dungeons crying on enemies to kill them. So it's an amazing pitch.
Wow.
But then you get these pickups, there's power-ups, but then the power-ups interact with each other. So you get these. So every so often you get something you've never seen before. It's what the hell is that? And it's some combination of these things that has just made it, when he presses the button, the entire screen explodes with poops or something. It's a mad game. So it has got a bit of staying power, but it's interesting to see these people getting a bit of a payday, and anyway, it's been fun to watch. But yeah, that's the other end of the spectrum.
That is very other end of the spectrum.
But yeah, otherwise, we took some time off. We did a bit of gardening, which involved going to the garden centre and buying something. But we uprooted the holly bush and kind of moved it to a more convenient section of the garden, so that the eye lines were a bit more, we could see a little bit more. So I was that is in the way of everything and it's annoying. Can we move it? And so we managed to do that, and we planted some things. They haven't died yet, despite the sort of frosty mornings that immediately followed it. But also I just took most of last Friday. So instead of doing the podcast, I thought I'm gonna program. I keep going on about my reports. I thought I'm just going to program it so that I can enter the data in a more convenient way and generate them in a more convenient way. But I basically spent probably about 20 hours on it in the end, doing something that takes me maybe 20 minutes a week to do by hand. So it's going to be a long time before it pays off. But it did mean that I could very quickly add some new stuff to it that would have been a nightmare to add before. So it's sort of it's cool. But yeah, I was for the first time, it was a weird feeling this Monday, because I felt I work for myself, but it's the first time I felt like I'm so behind on my work. Like I hadn't done loads of stuff that I usually do on Fridays, and I'm trying to crack the whip. And also, like, I've got this big bill came in that I was like, I need to figure this out. So if anyone wants to buy a domain name, squares.tv.
Oh.
But I did actually sell a couple of bits and just shipped them off this morning, so we're covered. It's fine. Bit of Marie Kondoed a couple of things out the door, rearranged my studio. My studio is really nice now, actually. Like I'm really happy with how that's feeling now. And my I've realised that I've been doing these different live streams, and actually, like, it seems like people really enjoy the music composition one. Where instead of just like sort of doing a loose live performance, I sort of work on a track. It seems like people get really into that, and so I'm going to do a bit. I'm going to turn my Saturday one of those into that, and make it all just a bit more like that. And let's play the next clip and get into the episode, shall we? Okay. Shaz says hi, Michael and Ivanka in chat.
Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Shaz. Shaz room. Right, let's talk about capital. Because it's a thing that I've only recently started getting. Certainly when we did our money, and I feel like I'm repeating myself so much, but when we did our money episodes early on in this podcast, years and years ago, this is episode 162 of a weekly podcast, I hadn't really even internalized the concept of capital. And now I'm like, it's all I'm trying to do. So I read this blog post. We'll link to it in the description. It's Don't End the Week with Nothing. It's just about like different kinds of capital and some rules, which we can go through some of the things that he says that you should do in order not to end the week with nothing, but just as sort of talking points. But it's basically the contrast between if you work for a salary. What was the quote? It was like, I do this work, you pay me the money, and at the end of the week we're even. Like, you just sort of sell your time, but you don't really come out of that with capital. You just come out of that with money, and your employer comes out of that with capital. Your employer comes out of that with stuff they can sell and profit from, and like that you're generating capital for your employer, but not for yourself. And that's something that I have managed to shoehorn. I've somehow like changed my situation. I just didn't want to do that anymore. That's why I quit contracting. I just wanted to start anything I do, I'm generating my own capital, because capital, and I think this good thing, like the first line of this, like, I'm a capitalist, a friend of mine is a devoted Marxist. I think we mutually agree that, considering any particular employee, it is in that employer's personal interest to stop selling hours of labour and start renting access to his accumulated capital as soon as humanly possible. I think that's a really clear way of putting it.
I think I don't. So I've often argued with an employer to say, if you're not going to give me more money, you have to give me interesting things to do so that I can learn stuff, so I can accumulate that. I've never viewed it as capital. I've more viewed it as value. But if you think about it as a sort of, your various capital buckets, doesn't he give examples here about social capital, some other human capital, skills you've built up, he calls them, social capital, reputational capital, as well as cash. Does he reference cash explicitly in his capital accumulation? He does. Monetary capital.
That's in the first thing he says. He doesn't just mean monetary capital.
And I think having there's relationships as well. There's stuff, So
human capital, social capital, reputational capital are the three things that he starts.
Other things which I think are, I don't think necessarily contracting excludes your ability to build capital, both of the monetary and the the whatever the other, certainly in terms of experiences.
Reputational, like I'm certainly not building any social capital at the moment. But remember when I say things, I'm a hard line. I like to do things like hard line because it's easier for me to think about it like that. So I just go, okay, if I cut this out, then But I wouldn't expect anyone else to have this thing.
But I think that it's quite hard to. We were talking about Twitch.
Yeah.
Specifically in a meeting at the company where I'm doing some work at the moment, and the designer she was like, watching me do work on Twitch would be really boring because a lot of the time I'm just sitting there sort of thinking, and then there'll be these bursts where I do, it's like and it's that sort of if you're measuring time or selling time or activity, you're not. There's not necessarily any visible thing that somebody's doing for your project for you. It's like sitting there thinking about something. It's quite hard to measure. So time's quite handy.
Yeah,
in that way.
I'm obsessed with time, measuring time. So.
You are, yeah. But I don't really. That's what my first. I don't know. It's the "don't end the week with nothing" statement at the front that made, I think, jarred my brain a bit.
Well, and it's because it's a fundamental change of habit. I think if you start thinking, but I think you maybe it's not immediately obvious to you what you're ending the week with, and it may just be reputational capital. But he's got some. I mean, this is all from a sort of I don't know if he's a programmer. He said he's a Japanese salaryman, and he was doing 70 to 90-hour weeks for 3 years. So he's sort of was in the thick of this this world. But we could sort of cover how he talks about doing it. So don't end a week with nothing. Prefer to work on things you can show. Prefer to work where people can see you, and prefer to work on things you can own. So I guess. But the thing about working on things. Where people can see you, for example, as you were just talking about, is you sort of have to adjust what you're doing to make it more visually exciting, or to make it something. You sort of you can't just do what you're doing and then
you've got to
point a camera at it. You've got to change what you're doing in order for it to make sense for a camera to be pointed at it.
Yeah, I think it's I was thinking of it as the difference between being the person at work who does loads of work and being the person at work who does work and then writes a blog post summarising it at the end of the week and tells everybody about it. Because it's that sort of... didn't we talk about this recently in terms of or maybe it was with somebody else, we were talking about how within a company you show value if you just quietly crack on with your job. How do you get to be the person that and I think that sort of it's taking the time to acknowledge for yourself to start with that you've done something,
and learning how to talk about it, learning how to show it, like getting into the habit of I one of my habits, and it's kind of stupid, but I kind of, for this very reason, I do a weekly summary video of what I got up to this week, just so that I've got this record of all the things that I just because it's so easy to forget all the things you were working on, and it was so much time, and you were so proud of it at the moment, and then 6 months goes down, and you're like, oh, I completely forgot I did that. But I was just imagining, if I did sort of want to apply for a job right now, and someone was like, okay, well, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? I'd be like, well, let me show you in great detail the dedication with which I fostered good habits during that time, and I challenge you to find anyone who can compare in that level. But yeah, it's writing a report is a different skill to doing the work that goes into the report.
It is, yeah.
It's like YouTube, figuring out how to hack a musical instrument to behave a certain way is a different thing to then making a YouTube video about how you did it. And if you sort of didn't capture stuff along the way, if you weren't in the habit of if you weren't thinking about doing that from the start, then you go back and it's oh, well, I've got no way of showing the stages of this now because I didn't log it, so I have to do it all again, kind of thing. Yeah. So, and I think that's you have to create new habits and sort of start the week with the expectation that you're going to need to report on this. So at least make sure. So when Twitter came out, I was like, I quite liked it. I'm talking about like 2007 or whatever. When was it? But like, it sort of almost felt to me at the time like, okay, it's almost like I've got to do something interesting today because otherwise I'll have nothing to tweet about. I want to make my life more interesting so that I've got stuff to talk about on social media. Obviously, it's become rarefied to the point of madness now. But when it was started, it felt like this sort of like new thing that, new force on my life that seemed positive to me at the time.
But I think though the idea of accumulating it as capital is kind of easier, I think, to digest than the idea of showing off.
Yes.
And actually, the actions are the same in many ways. Do you know what I mean? Hey, look at me. I wrote this amazing blog post. Oh, hey, look at me. I did this thing. Hey, look at me. Actually, if you're not doing it, if you can, switch your brain a bit and move it from like, I'm not telling you this to show off. I'm telling you this to acknowledge the capital that I've gained this week. What have I learned this week? What can I offer the world this week? Then I think it's actually a gentler way of thinking about your achievements.
Yeah.
Because it is a celebration of acknowledging your capital. It's the same as looking at your bank balance and going, woohoo, I've got some money in it.
If you've got a blog with a few posts going back every week that's sort of like, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this. I think that's cool. Like you suddenly, like, you don't feel like you've got nothing to show for all of this work, apart from maybe a bit of cash if you're lucky.
I think it's quite. I mean, I've because I've struggled always with that. I mean, that sort of showing off element or the self-promotion thing that some people do so well at, and I've never been particularly good at. I don't think. I think a lot of my reputational capital exists because I've been at it for over 20 years. Some things have to succeed in that time, something's got to stick rather than me actively. I mean, I have always nurtured a network, not but just in a way to sort of say hello to people and there's people I like working with, so I make sure I invite them into things and bring them along or whatever. But I think it's a nice way of acknowledging your value is to acknowledge these different types of capital. Yes. So I like it now that we've talked about it.
Well, he uses the word portfolio because I've been thinking about this in terms of you're developing your portfolio. You're like putting things into that so that you've got this sort of document or whatever it is that you a designer. But then I think an interesting way of thinking about that is like people don't get around to updating their portfolio until they've got a job interview coming up. Yeah. But if you thought, or CV, like just even your CV, but if you were in the habit of like recording like achievements week by week in a way that was publicly presentable, just put it directly into your CV as you go. And then you're going to have this really rich, exciting document. You can like edit stuff out, but you're going to have this thing which really demonstrates your worth rather than something you've cobbled together at the last minute and it's really dry and it's based on vaguely remembered, my responsibilities included this and that. If you're like, even if you're literally just working in a job and you don't even care about it that much, if you always have the idea of those entries to your CV in the back of your mind and you're kind of actively adding those week by week, that is even a start before you even getting into emailing or blogging or anything like that.
I think that he talks here about this, like being upfront with your employer about like your other projects and your other things. And I think, and the problem sometimes is that you're not allowed to talk about what you're doing in public.
Yes.
And so there's this sort of so you can choose to restrict your public documentation to your organization and maybe just think outside of where you are. And sometimes often you can't bring those, look what I learned, in a linear way. You can't sort of go, I did this research, these were the findings, here you go world, enjoy the findings of the research. So it's and like
he says in the thing like some of the reason you can get paid an awful lot of money like to work on some Google algorithm is because you're not allowed to share that. So they're sort of denying you the opportunity to create that reputational capital by sharing what you're doing. Like they have to pay you to prevent you from sharing that stuff. And that's part of why you get the big bucks, when you have to work in secret.
But it's quite. I'm thinking about a few things that I work on now that I do, because he talks about, you know, additional projects and stuff. So if you have like the buckets of money, reputation, whatever, social. What was the other one? Reputational, social, and human.
The skills you've built up, basically. Yeah.
I mean, I think many of the projects that I pick up, this is quite a valuable. Should I do this project? Scale. It's like, right, are you paying me enough? No. Okay. What reputational gain am I going to get out of this? Not very much. Okay. But is there going to be social gain? Oh yeah, there is. Great. Or human gain. So I can think of at least one voluntary thing I do at the moment that doesn't seem to score highly on any of those. I thought just made that. What do I get out of this? Not a lot. Because of course the opposite of gaining social or social capital is like working with people that you're like, damn, I'm not sure I want to work with these people again type things. Like, bye. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's quite, I think it's a useful thought exercise for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
About the things you're working on.
Let's do a clip. Back in. It's a long build up to that break, but I thought it was worth waiting for. So if we can sort of look at these. Here's little rules. Prefer working on things you can show. And we've talked a little bit about that. But if you cannot build things you can show at work, you should build things that you can show outside of work. But yeah, definitely something I did at LBI was, and he talks about this a little bit, was I pushed for LBI to have a bit of an open source initiative. Because on the one hand, I saw that we were open source software. I feel like everyone knows what it is, but some people probably don't. Open source just means it's like out in public and lots of different people work on it, and it's sort of lots of big companies now. Like Facebook have huge open source projects that are really good, and Google have some pretty big open source projects, and even Microsoft have embraced it in more recent years. And that it just means that you get so many. Even Apple, like with Swift, the programming language, they've got this big open source project. But it was Apple, like obviously, like they would never do anything in like it was only after Steve Jobs died actually that I don't know, maybe there was some rumblings before that. But the fact that even Apple are doing open source stuff means that it's obviously got some value. But one of the reasons that you want it as an employee is that you want to be able to take some stuff with you after you leave.
Yeah.
And that was really like a reason that I wanted to. Because I was making these frameworks, and frameworks are tools to help you build stuff. So I would always be building these video players or these Flash websites, and I had this sort of system of putting them together that was really good. But I didn't want to just not be able to use it when I went to my next job. So by sort of pushing for the open source thing and all the things that are good about open source, I was able to legitimize taking it with me. But then, like a lesson I did learn from that was. I'd made this thing that was technically open source so that I could take it with me, but what I never found any time to do was to make a video showing how to do it, make any good documentation, build a community around it, all those things that you have to do to have an actually successful open source project that actually sort of starts benefiting from other people contributing to it. So even on that basic as I still got to take some personal capital out of it, so it was worthwhile for me to some extent. But I sort of wish that I could have built up a lot more reputational capital if I could have made time to do documentation on it as well, and do videos and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's quite, and you can't, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to fill all your buckets out of one thing, Do you know what I mean? You sort of need a mixture of things. And I think the mixture of things is I wrote a blog post for NHS providers at the beginning of the year. And it got published last week, and then I promoted it this week, because last week I was not present and correct. But it's nice to put something out there, but it's quite nerve-wracking as well. It's like, am I right? Is this right?
Well, that's the thing. Like, to write something up, you have to be sort of state it for it to be readable. You've got to sort of like state it in no uncertain terms, which takes time. I'm sorry this was so long. I didn't have to write a shorter one. Like, it does take time to explain yourself. So, again, coming back to the YouTube thing, like it may take me like 3 hours to figure out how to do something, but then to explain it takes me like another 20 hours to produce the video, and like do another draft and rewrite and shoot all the bits and then change my mind about it all and rewrite it and start again. And like, it's tricky. And in a way, also, you're trying to present this stuff for anyone to actually give a shit about your Hacker News post or whatever it is. Like, you have to actually show some value to them, like that it's going to have some value to the observer, which is sort of a different challenge to look at, because I don't think people, and I'm someone that's very experienced in this, I don't think people particularly, once in a while they do, but for some people they do, like they don't. I don't know how much time people spend going, wow, that guy's amazing. Look how clever that thing you did. No. They go, I can use that to help me. Like, that's what they want, right?
I think this blog post is particularly why I actually wrote it and got it published and didn't just sort of sit on it for weeks. It's an advice piece of it. It's like, here's some things that you can do.
Yeah.
And it's, based on 20 years experience and quite a lot of sitting on NHS boards, which I've been doing recently, or was doing last year. And so listening to the conversations and understanding the problem. So I think that does, and it makes it, because you're also bringing a gift,
exactly.
Here's something. It's not about you at all. It's about like, here's some things.
And when you choose what to do, it's sort of that comes into it. Like, am I doing something that I'm going to be able to, that anyone else is going to be interested in learning about? And maybe I should pick it's like I've switched from doing stuff in esoteric technologies for my live streams to like a really popular technology, because I feel like a lot more people will then be able to get some value out of that than would be if it's like, oh, well, obviously it takes 6 weeks to set up your coding environment before you can start doing it this way. So again... providing value in your talking about yourself is probably the only way to really get anyone to actually look at it, if that's the goal. And it is kind of, if you want reputation, then you really need to be doing something that people are going to want to share and people are going to want to like actually look at, because it helps them.
It's, in this instance, I did ask the person who sort of commissioned it. I was like, what's the etiquette about promoting stuff you've written? He was like, well, I don't know, but what we need is, he said, think of how much help it'll be bringing to the NHS the more people read it. I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's like a way that like helps you justify it.
Whatever helps you explain it. It's weird though. So many things about like a sort of, but I think with. I don't know if it's for me, if it's my age or just the length of experience, or even just having this podcast and spending a week, a weekly we have this, we do have a reflection time every week, a check-in, that's made me much more confident or much more or appreciative of the value of actually telling people stuff. Like, listen to me. I know stuff. It may not be useful to you now, but it might be.
And I don't think it's I don't think it's even useful to worry about it in terms of self-promotion, because honestly, like, and this is something I've learned from Reddit, like, you kind of worry, and I've said it before, I'm sure, like, you worry that I'm posting something I made and no one's upvoting it because they can see that I'm shamelessly self-promoting. But then when you post something that you've made and people love it, you're like, they couldn't care less that, in fact, they're happy that you, the creator of it, posted it, because they can talk to you and ask you about it. So this idea that it really, I think, more comes back down to that value proposition of sharing it. Why are you sharing this? Is it to sort of inflate yourself, or is it something that, does it inflate you by virtue of being so helpful to the person that is consuming it, kind of thing?
But then what's wrong with that?
No, that's fine. No,
that's
exactly,
the thing. You know what I mean? And I think that's taken me years to acknowledge.
that was supposed to be the positive one. I guess I worded it in a way that still made you think I was couching it as a negative.
Yeah, but it's taken me years to sort of go that even if people don't agree with you, don't find it helpful, even if it sparks a conversation in somebody else, you know, whatever it is that your moment of sharing is doing, you know, it will invariably be raise your capital, one of your 4 capitals. So therefore it's like, which is a good thing. Anyway. Good.
So this is, I guess the point, capital is something that we should bear in mind as us sort of youngish professionals, aging professionals. How much capital have I accumulated? What am I going to do when I'm old and I can't work anymore because my brain gets tired after 6 hours of work in a week? I'm probably going to need to have created enough things that I can start renting access to one way or another.
It's the way he phrases it. It's like the renting access deal. But, you know, it's that, even for me, the biggest benefit my various capitals have given me so far is that I don't have to look for work.
Yeah.
You know, I've touched wood. I've been like that. To me, that's a great benefit.
Yeah.
Of that accumulated capital, because that cost, you know, takes time and energy looking for work.
Yeah.
So.
Well, maybe we can sort of take a slight left turn into a sort of a bit of a conversation Sharon and I had earlier this week, where I was which is about like, because it just made me think. I've created some capital, which is more or less passively giving me money. But I think through this, maybe I don't know, it's something that maybe it's a bigger subject, but something I want to touch on, which was, we had this conversation where we were watching that Can't Get You Out of My Head, Chris, that documentary on the BBC, which is very interesting. Let me just make sure it's Chris Can't Get You Out of My. I just don't want to get his name wrong. It's by it's about empire conspiracies. Adam Curtis. Sorry, this documentary about like the history of conspiracies and China and great. US, and it's really good. But he was talking about the founder of Médecins Sans Frontières. See how I did that in French, and how he'd like got ensconced about something and gone and created this organization. And my sort of casual, as we were talking about it later, I was like, I wonder what sort of capital he was able to, what he had to be able to do that. And Sharon sort of like, I don't know, I hope she doesn't mind me talking about this, but sort of like criticized me a bit for being like, well, why is that the first thing you go to? Because it seems sort of like, where did he? It must be nice. I think her thing was like, it came across as me going, it must be nice to be able to do something good. Not all of us have that privilege. Not all of us have that thing. But I realised that, you know, I got grumpy about it and had a stomp, and because I was like, well, no, it's just how I look at things. So I'm really interested in the nature of capital and the nature of privilege and the nature of all these things. But I realised that something I've been doing is with all of this privilege awareness and it was not wanting to sort of big myself up and take too much responsibility for my successes, is that you have to take credit for your successes at a certain point, or you start taking it away from everyone. Like, I didn't just fluke my way through into being able to. I didn't just fluke my way through my career. I worked really hard, and I should be, that was all. I built up some capital and I worked hard, and it didn't happen by accident. Yes, it probably couldn't have happened in quite the same way if I didn't have certain privileges, and it might have been different without the privileges. But we have to sort of a way of being a little bit more. I'm trying to be a lot more solid in my own affirmation, my self validation, and say no, I am going to take credit for some of these things, that successes I had, because although the world is chaotic and I'm completely dependent on the whims of Apple and completely dependent on what this and that and the other, I did put the time in, and no one succeeds without some sort of confluence of events supporting their hard work. So okay, I'm going to try and do better at that. And I think accumulating the things that you have successfully done for yourself and worked hard on, and whether or not it was a fluke that it sort of took off and went viral, doesn't change the fact that, you are that person.
Yeah. I think yes. I think that your there's a couple of things. Maybe actually another episode. It's okay. So if you don't acknowledge your capital, do you have it? So, for example, if you want to start a really amazing project, because I have this constant bubbling away in the back of my head, I really want to do something good, something big, but I don't do anything about it because I'm like, oh, I haven't got the money, I'm going to pay the bills, all this stuff. So unless you acknowledge your capital, you don't actually know what you're working with. Maybe I do, I don't know. Maybe I do have the reputational capital to ask somebody to invest in something, or maybe I do, I don't know. So you have to count your capital, acknowledge your capital in order to be able to use it. And then there's the question of, what do you do with your capital?
Yes. And I think spending the capital could be a whole other episode. But certainly you've reminded me, at what point am I earning enough money? At what point is my life in a good enough situation where I can actually start thinking about helping other people? And that was the early done good conversations, that's a lot sooner than you probably think. Yeah. And it is sort of a bit of, that was the other part of it, it's sort of, you can make excuses and without even realising it. Oh, well, I could never have started Medicine Sans Frontier because I didn't have the wealth.
Exactly.
And it's just an excuse, and it's no, you have to sort of know the things that you do have rather than make excuses for the things that you don't have.
I agree. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it because I shared a few weeks ago my found a pic. My granny. Did I tell you this on the podcast? I don't know. My granny was chairman, in fact, of the Tree Lovers League in Birmingham in the 60s, 70s. And then I shared it, and then somebody said, well, let's start a Tree Lovers League for the 21st century. And I was like, I did that it's actually, why don't I start a Tree Lovers League for the 21st century? It totally is in keeping with me and my values. Which is probably explained by the fact that my granny, explains my heritage a bit. Yeah. But, it's well, why not?
And we're all unique people, and we have our own, no one else is going to do what we do. So what each person does, although there's a lot on that individualism in that Adam Curtis thing as well. But yeah, definitely. I think by being more conscious of the capital you have and privileges connected to that, you can be a lot more confident in your ability to achieve things that you might think are beyond your means, or because they're probably not. And often, just once you start on something, you always figure it out. So there we go.
Good. Well, I'm glad we've had this chat.
Okay, I'm going to do it. All right, thank you for listening to that podcast episode. If you like it, you can go to grandpodcast.com and subscribe on your podcast player of choice, or you can support us on Patreon and get the video episode several days early now. And where can people find you on the internet, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at Michael Forrest on everything. I'm live on Twitch quite a lot as well, and I make apps, goodtohear.co.uk, and I'm revamping something that came from my financial urgency this last couple of weeks. And another thing I saw was the importance of demonstrating value in your product immediately, rather than expecting people to sort of infer it over time, because if you can't immediately see the benefit, then you're just going to go somewhere. So I've been revamping my Done Good app and working very hard on making that a beautiful onboarding first use experience, and to really helping things. Shaz says, thank you both. Also, thanks for confirming that I am always right. Oh, good. Well, you're always right, except for when you say you can't do the things that you want to do, Shaz. So, sort out that capital awareness, and you can have such a better time, I think. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we shall see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. What about hyperthyroidism?